Okay, good morning, colleagues. Let's make a start there. My name's Matt. I'm one of the conveners at researchED Home, and it's great to see you all here today. Thanks for finding the time to fit us in. Couple of reminders about researchED Home. We've been running since the start of the summer term with a talk from a wonderful education expert each day at 11 o'clock. Each of those sessions is recorded and is available live. You can see the full bank of all of the sessions that we've had so far over the term at the top of our Twitter page, so please do go take a look. And that will include this session from Karen. If you want to share it afterwards, use it in your school's professional development or any other creative thing that you can think to do with it. So today I am delighted that Karen is joining us. Karen is now the COO at TeacherTapp, which is basically, I describe this as YouGov for teachers. It was set up a few years ago and provides incredible insights into the daily lives of teachers. If you don't do TeacherTapp every day, then who are you? What are you doing? Get it downloaded, get doing TeacherTapp. Karen has had also a range of other fantastic jobs in the education system, including at NFER and the Driver Youth Trust, and most recently has been heading up all of the specialist provision with me and some colleagues at Oak National Academy, which I'm very grateful to Karen for. Karen's also helping to make sure that all of the new national professional qualifications are written with a good eye on inclusion and the needs of pupils with special educational needs and disabilities, which we are very grateful to her for. If you have questions for Karen throughout her presentation today, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom. Please just post the questions there. When Karen's finished with her presentation, she will try to take as many of those questions as she possibly can, but please don't feel you need to wait to post them. If a question comes to you midway through, please just pop that in there straight away. Nothing else from me other than to hand over to Karen and really looking forward to hearing your presentation today.
Thanks, Matt. Let me try and get the slides up. 1 second. Right, and we're off. Yes. So, hello. Thank you for having me, Matt, and researchED at Home. I'm really honoured to be able to speak with you today. And as you explained, I'm now part of the team at TeacherTapp, and I'm going to be using some of the TeacherTapp data today. So as Matt explained, for those of you that don't know, TeacherTapp is a daily surveying app that was created by two of my educational heroes, actually, by Laura McInerney and Professor Becky Allen. And when you add into that mix the developer expertise that's brought by Alex Wetherall, you have a fantastic resource for teachers. And it's used by around 9,000 teachers a day. So it's a really big resource as well. As you might imagine, there's a massive amount of data that's been amassed by the TeacherTapp team over the past 3 years that they've been running. But for reasons that will become apparent in the course of my presentation, what I'm going to talk about today is what we've learned through TeacherTapp about the relationship between teachers and parents. But before we go into the TeacherTapp detail, let's just take a look first at what we know more broadly about parental engagement. So this slide has some data on it from the Education Endowment Foundation. We know from EEF meta-analysis that there's moderate evidence of the impact of parental engagement. It has a moderate cost overall, and it can lead to a 3-month learning gain. However, parental engagement is a broad brush. It's often focused more, or at least the evaluation is often focused more at primary schools rather than secondary schools, and certainly more so than other alternative or specialist settings. And therefore the types and the costs of interventions vary enormously. So for example, on one hand, you could have You could be holding a parental workshop in your school, or you could be texting parents, and you can do that within the resource that you already have within your own staffing. To move along the kind of cost and scale line a little bit more, you could run a family support program where you might need to train some people specially, you might need to provide some special resources, and so that would have a greater cost, maybe go on a little bit longer. And then at kind of the most expensive end of the scale, you could be employing dedicated homeschool liaison teacher or teachers. You could have a number of staff who are responsible for this role. And then that starts to become quite a significant part of the school budget. So overall, whilst it's undoubtedly a good thing to do, the problem is defining exactly what it is. We don't actually know how to improve attainment by increasing engagement, and that's probably quite problematic. But let's dial back and look in a bit more detail at exactly what engagement could be and what we might mean by that. So one thing we know at TeacherTapp is how you ask the question is really important. So when we ask quite a positive question about homeschool relations, we get quite a positive answer. So for example, when we asked, how much do you agree with this statement? Families and the wider community are supportive of teachers and families in the school. And the majority are agreeing with that statement. So the majority of teachers think that families are supportive of the school. However, if we ask a more negatively worded question, we get a more negative response. So for example, when we suggested that the parents of pupils have an unrealistic expectation of how we can support them at school, you see that quite a lot of people are agreeing with that negative statement. Take that a step further, and if you stop asking about the parents in your school, if you start talking about society more generally, again, it changes the data that we have about how teachers and parents are interacting. So we asked this quite broad societal question. In my experience, parents have become far too disrespectful of teachers. And you see there that quite a lot, 84% of teachers agree with that statement, even if it's only slightly. And one more example of that phenomena. Many of the problems in schools today have arisen because parents do not teach their children to act respectfully. And you're getting nearly 90% agreeing with that statement, which goes to show that even though teachers feel parents are supportive in their school, remember that first graph, they also think that there could be unrealistic expectations and that there's a potential lack of respect. I think basically, if we were to give it kind of a Facebook status, the relationship between parents and teachers would be characterized as complicated. Another way that we try to investigate this at TeacherTapp is by looking at specific incidents. So rather than talking about what do you think parents think about your school, or rather than thinking about what do parents think, what do you think parents are in society, we could ask about a specific question that's a specific incident that's happened recently. So we've asked, for example, has a parent done something to undermine a behavioural sanction that you have given a child in the past week? And I think over a quarter is actually quite a worrying percentage to see that. Another one that's probably worse, and I found quite surprising actually, was when we asked whether you had been shouted at as a teacher by a parent, and a disappointing number have, particularly if you're in leadership. Like I say, the relationship's really quite complicated. But relationships are a two-way phenomena. So what do we know about what teachers and schools are doing for parents? How are they supporting this relationship? How are teachers and schools making this a two-way? So we asked whether teachers make it easy for parents to contact them. And I think what this data shows is that it depends quite a lot on what type of school you work in and what your role is within that school. So if you're a head teacher, particularly if you're a head teacher in a primary school, then you say you do make it really quite easy to be contacted. But if you're a classroom teacher in a secondary school, for example, it's not quite the same story. You're making it a lot less easy to be contacted. We also have asked some questions to try and find out where you think these bones of contention are. So we asked a kind of hypothetical one about if parents were to take control of decision making, what decisions do you think they'd change? And I think the high responses to some of these answers suggest that teachers are quite well aware of some of the points of disharmony and some of the areas where there are tensions between home and school. So in particular around homework, behaviour policies, uniform, extracurricular provision. But the one that I find most interesting is the reporting to parents. So teachers know, or think they know, that parents would like to be reported to differently, yet that doesn't actually, that's something that's really quite within your control, but it's not something that changes. So I think that's really interesting. But what can we do to research this further? Because you might have noticed I'm kind of tripping over my words about what teachers think parents think, and that's a bit problematic. And I think one of the things that we could do to research the relationship in a better way would be to able to triangulate the teacher data with parent data. And it's with that in mind that I'm delighted to be able to reveal that next month, the team behind TeacherTapp will be launching Parent Ping. So the concept is just the same as TeacherTapp. There'll be a small number of questions each day for parents and a link to a tip or a blog or an article for a kind of learning opportunity. The respondents get to see the responses in aggregated charts from the day before, and there'll be the badge collections and things like that as well. I think this will be a massive contribution to better understanding and improving homeschool relationships. But like I say, it doesn't launch till maybe next week. We're waiting on the app development to tell you exactly when it will be ready. So hopefully I can come back to another researchED, maybe even a face-to-face one in the future, and use some of that data to share. But I don't have that yet. So in the meantime, I've come up with 10 tips on homeschool communications that I hope might help. Some of the tips might be blindingly obvious and you'll probably do loads of them already. But what I hope is that there might be part of one of the tips that you'll find useful, that will set you thinking, that will make you have some ideas about ways you could work differently in your classroom, in your school, around communication. And that will make it all worthwhile for me. Then at the end, I'll share the contact details for how you can register for Parent Ping, and also there'll be a QR code so that if you're not using TeacherTapp, that's the point at which you get your phone out and screenshot the presentation so that you can download TeacherTapp and join in with this data. So let's have a look at some tips. The first one is about honesty. So honesty is the foundation of any relationship. And if parents suspect that they're not being told the truth, or that you're glossing over concerns, then the relationship is doomed to fail. So think about how you can share information in the most truthful way possible. And it links quite closely to this second tip, which is about being timely. So if you have concerns about a child's learning or a child's behaviour, don't wait until parents' evening or report cards to address it. Address it at the first opportunity. It's that part of, links back to the honesty, that if a parent thinks that everything is going swimmingly and little Johnny is doing great in maths and their behaviour in class is just exemplary, and it comes to parents' evening and they hear that neither of those things are true, then first off, that will be quite shocking, but it'll also be quite surprising, because when did this start? Could they parent have been doing more to support them in maths at home? Could they have been doing some sort of sanctioning at home around the behaviour as well? It's too late to wait till the end of term to report this stuff. Get in touch as soon as you can. Number 3 is about asking for help, and potentially, if it feels like the right situation, actively seeking parental expertise and asking them what works for them and whether there's anything that they're doing at home that you can reinforce in school. And that gives you the opportunity to do it the other way around as well. This one can be particularly useful for children with special educational needs or disabilities. Remember always that children spend far longer at home than they do at school, and that parents are dealing with behaviours or attitudes or abilities every day, all the time, and that they might have ways that they can work around things. They've found things that work for them and their child that you might be able to utilise in your classroom. I'm not saying that you will be on every situation, but if you don't ask, you don't know. Number 4 is about communication, and it's about ensuring that communication is accessible. How easy is it to navigate your school website? Have you ever tried? Have you ever tried coming at it with fresh eyes? I mean, this could be literally from an accessibility point of view around the fonts and the colours that you're using, or it could be more practically that, you know, it's 10 million clicks to get to your subject area, to get to your contact details. And is that 10 million clicks too many? Similarly, is it easy enough to get hold of you and to get past your school's receptionist? Schools receptionists are absolutely brilliant at shielding you from all of the junk calls and emails and junk mail that a school gets, advertising stuff, selling stuff. You don't get any of that, or hopefully very little of that. But do they know how to recognise when an important communication is coming through from a parent? Do they know how to get that message to you? Do you have a time when you're available to take calls, when you could be put through? And do you tell parents about that? Don't assume that all parents know that you are busy between 9 and 10. Don't assume that parents will know that you have playground duty at lunchtime. Let the parents actually know when is a good time to contact you. Make yourself available. Think back to that 25% of secondary school teachers who admit that they don't make it easy for parents to contact them. When you are communicating, avoid using jargon and abbreviation and acronyms. We have so many in education. Remember that parents don't and shouldn't know them. It's not necessary to do that. So talk in normal people language. And a little tip around communication with parents via writing, whether that's email or letters. Be aware of parents' literacy. It might not be as high as your own. And also think that when there are certain cognitive disorders, they could be running within the family. So for example, dyslexia is often hereditary. So if you've got a dyslexic child in your class, it's a fair chance that their parent or one of their parents might be dyslexic as well. So just think about that when you're providing written communications, and think about whether there's any better formats for communicating with parents, and what you can do, how you can ask about whether it's appropriate or not. Number 5 is listen, and it's probably one of my more obvious tips. But just remember that so much of school communication is actually one way. So you send out reports, you send out bulletins, you send out newsletters, but they're not often two-way communication formats. So think through that and what opportunities you could create with them or within different formats to actually receive information as well as transmitting information. And when a parent takes the time to tell you something, do make sure that you actively listen to what they're saying. Try not to be dismissive of it, even if it's a blindingly obvious or silly thing. It could have taken them quite a lot of effort and courage to be contacting you. So make sure you respect that as well. That links to this point about who's got the power in the relationship. So there are plenty of people in this world who did not have a good school experience themselves. And that will carry through into adulthood. So parents who in their own time at school did not enjoy it, did not attend, perhaps did not learn in the way that they ought to have done, will still carry that with them and may well have a fear of school that manifests in one way or another. They will be scared of you as teachers. They will be petrified of you as head teachers. I know this, I'm a pretty educated, pretty well ingrained within the education community. But when it comes to going into my children's school, that power relationship is there. The teacher is the most important. If nothing else, they have control over the happiness in a day-to-day basis of my child. So there is a definite power relationship there, and you need to think about it when you're interacting. One of those ways that it manifests in kind of a concrete way is when you're talking to one another. Think about the titles that you use. So you are there as a teacher known as Mrs. Smith. What do you call the parent? Do you call them Mrs. Wespieser? Or do you sometimes forget that surname or not use that surname and call that person mum? Personally, that drives me mad. I think that's disrespectful to me, that I am a person in my own right. My existence in the world is not just via my child. I know very well that other people don't feel like that. Some people really do embrace that as their identity, and that's fantastic for them as well. So the best way around that is to ask. So when you're going into a meeting with a parent and you introduce yourself, hi, I'm Mrs. Smith. Can I call you Mrs. Wespieser? Or thinking about the power relationships, hi, I'm Mrs. Smith, but you can call me Jane. Can I call you Karen? That's a real opener to actually leveling some of those power relationships, taking out some of that formality so that you can have a much more honest relationship. I'd love to know your thoughts on that one, by the way. Number 7 is about structured conversations. So this is particularly for when you've got some bad news. Little Johnny's not doing well in maths. Little Johnny's behaviour is not what we expect. And if you think that this might be the first time that the parents heard it, or you think that you need to kind of change the way that you're communicating it because you might have said it before, but you don't think it's kind of getting through, you're not getting the relationship support with the parent, but you don't think the right thing is happening as a result, then consider structuring your conversation. For example, by creating a notes template. It could be as simple as the good news sandwich, so that you're making sure that you're saying something positive as well as the negatives. But it could also be a list, kind of a bullet list of everything you want to address. What it shouldn't be is a script, because that will obviously come across quite badly if you're literally reading a script of what you want to say. But making sure you actually find the time, make the time to plan out that conversation before it happens will make sure that that conversation happens much more smoothly. encouraging parents, and this often kind of comes to a head around homework. So remember, homework was one of those policies that teachers thought that parents want to change the most. I'm going to ask that question of the parents to see if the teachers' thoughts are true on that one. But it's the real point in most homeschool communications where school and home are interacting. So you need to encourage parents to offer a balanced degree of support, but you also need to explain what a balanced degree of support for homework is in your setting. What does that actually mean to you? Do you want parents to engage? Do you want them to tell every spelling? Do you want them to check it every night? Or do you want the child to be working independently, and all you want is the parent to ensure that the child is sitting down? Make it clear what you want. Also make it clear how much time it's meant to be taking up. As well as this being the main point where home and school interact, it's also one of the main points that as a parent, it can be a real cause of tension within the home, whether that's because your child isn't doing it well enough, isn't spending long enough on it, but it can cause a real friction in the parental relationship as well, and you need to remember that. And so one way to kind of deal with this is to make it clear how much time you expect to be spent on a task. So rather than necessarily just setting a task, thinking about how different learners might take a different amount of time to do that. So to say, spend 20 minutes on this, no more, and rather than getting the parent to kind of sign off on it, get the parent just to write down, this is how long they spent on it. And that can be a really useful kind of form of communication and give you an insight into what homework is like in the home. EEF also have a good part of their toolkit on homework that's probably worth having a look at. Number 9, share with parents. So make sure that you give details of approaches and methods that you're using in school so that they can be used to support home learning as well. Don't assume that parents will know how to do stuff. So if you're teaching using the bar model in maths, do not expect parents to know what the bar model is. The same for reading. If you're sending a reading book home every day, then don't expect parents to have an in-depth knowledge of systematic synthetic phonics. You need to actually explain what you want them to be doing and how they're meant to be doing it. So maybe setting up workshops and things like that for parents to come in and to learn about bar models, to learn about phonics. And the same could go for non-academic stuff as well. It could go about behaviour. There might be things that you think are quite important. Maybe it's around cutlery use at lunchtime, or maybe it's just about being quiet the first time you're asked. If there's sort of special words, special songs, special cues, then you could tell those to parents. I mean, don't tell parents how to parent, but just sharing. And if you've got that supportive relationship set up, then hopefully that could be a message that could go down really well, and you can have a conversation about it. Last tip, and it's kind of a generic one: value the relationship with parents. Remember, relationships are two-way. It's in everyone's interest, especially the child's, to make it work. So see the value in what parents can contribute, and in that way, parents will see the same from you as well. So those were my 10 super obvious tips. And then this is the key screen. So you can get your phone, screenshot this page to get the QR code for TeacherTapp. Parenting doesn't have a QR code just yet. It's not in the App Store just yet. Very, very soon. If you go to the Parenting website, then you can register there, and I can let you know as soon as it is in the App Store. You can email me about questions, suggestions for Parenting, anything you'd like to follow up around that. And then you can follow me and Parenting on Twitter. So that was it for my presentation. I'm going to have a look and see if there's any questions. There's no questions, Matt.
So you'll have noticed I've had a slight change of location.
Did I bore you?
There's just like a weird rotation in our house at the moment, and it is my turn to be banished to this particular location. My time ran out. So colleagues, if you've got any questions, the Q&A box is at the bottom. And do feel free to post any questions that you might have for Karen in there. Karen, I just wanted to, I'll do one to start off. Like, of the various advice that you've given us, and lots of which the sort of data behind has come from TeacherTapp and then other sort of general experience, like, which of those bits have we got like really good quality evidence for, like in the wider research community? So with your like former NFER hat on, like if you were assessing these, like, are there ones that you think are particularly good bets where we've done some really good quantitative research behind them?
I think probably of those ones, it's homework. Like I said, EF have a really good section on their website about homework and what the most impactful types of homework are and the least. And given that we know from the TeacherTapp data that homework is one of those kind of areas that teachers think parents would most like to change, making sure that they are using, according to EF, kind of the best bets when it comes to homework, because that just it just kind of helps, doesn't it, to say we're doing this because the evidence shows it's going to lead to a learning gain, or not, and it weakens the argument. So one of the bugbears I have with the school that my children go to is that they set these big topic homeworks, which, according to the EEF framework, have little impact, and that creates quite a strained relationship when you've got quite an informed parent saying, but EEF don't mention this. It's an interesting dilemma.
And then just before we jump to the questions, I have just a second thing that I saw once that I would love to get your thoughts on. I think it speaks to a couple of your tips about accessibility. So a particular school, they had a name for it. They called it like a welcome walk or something along those sorts of lines. So what they did was they took a whole bunch of teaching and actually the support staff, so the people who work on reception, they all went outside the school gates. And then they did a walk from the outside of the school gate, imagining they were a parent coming to visit the school, and then like called out all of the things on the way that would make that like a less welcoming process than it might be, right? So like really difficult to get yourself buzzed through the security gate, like not obvious, like there's numbers on here and just a buzz. Do I need a code? Like, how do I get through? Like, got to reception, like, not offered a cup of tea, like, you know, just like they were astonished actually when they'd gone through the process, just the number of things, you know, like the room that they went into, and we were a bit guilty of this, the school, the last school that I worked in, like the parent room is like pretty grim. Like it's not very nice, you know, when we've got like art classrooms stuffed with amazing pupil art, like and so we, you know, there was like decorating that room, there were all kinds of things I think that made them feel they're really simple, that could make people feel more welcome. I thought it was like a really neat little process to go through.
Yeah, no, I should add that should be number 11, shouldn't it? Put yourself in other people's shoes, because trying to view what that feels like, you know, as a parent. So one of the things that I saw some newspaper articles around through COVID was schools emailing parents at before 8 o'clock in the morning, which, yes, you can see you need to send out the day's learning, but that kind of stressor that it might be causing parents to receive those emails at those kind of times of day. Just put yourself in other people's shoes can sometimes help when you're thinking about communications and relationships.
Yeah, indeed. Right, you've got some questions coming in.
If a parent doesn't want to help us with their child's learning, what would you suggest? Yeah, from Mrs. Heedy. That's a really good question, and it's sadly it's not this presentation. So I can put together, I've got somewhere a reading list for engaging disengaged parents, because that is a whole academic discipline of its own, and really is an important area. And I know that what I've been talking about really does speak much more to those who are engaged and or sort of not, at least not disengaged. However, having said that, I do think all those fundamentals of relationships and communications are the starting point to engagement. But I can share a reading list at some point that might speak to that a little bit more, if that's all right. And the other one from Ruth. Will there be a special section in Parent Ping for SEND parents? There will at some point. So Parent Ping will start slowly, and what we will need to do is get users. That will be the first thing, and we'll need to get quite a lot of users. Once we start thinking about the different categories of parent, whether you're talking about a primary versus a secondary parent, whether you're talking mums versus dads, north of England versus south of England, send versus non-send, then we need to have an even larger sample. So there won't be questions initially that are only or specifically about send, but hopefully you'll be reassured, and given my background, you'll know that that is something that I'm really interested in, and we will certainly head that way. But to start with, it's just all parents, and we won't be disaggregating for a little while. Those are the two questions, Matt.
Great. Any more? You've got 10 seconds to get your Q&A into the Q&A box. Of course, Karen is on Twitter, and you can get her at her Twitter account if you've got more questions. If she's promising to post reading lists as well, we'll hold her to that and make sure she posts that on there. Karen, if you give us a nudge, we'll make sure we give that a retweet through the researchED Home account. So on that note, I just want to say a huge thank you for spending some time with us today. Apologies for my room change midway through that fascinating presentation. And for all of you who are watching, remember this and all of the researchED Home presentations are available. You just need to go onto our Twitter page, and there is a link to a spreadsheet where you can get the whole lot. So whether you're using them for yourself, listening to them whilst you're going for your socially distanced walks, or maybe in your school CPD next year, you're very welcome to use them however it makes sense for you to use them. Have a lovely day, and we will speak to you very soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye.
Bye.